So it looks like have to be doing something better in terms of the lighting, this whole kind of setup. Obviously I've got a backlight and I don't have an overhead light, which is, I guess, maybe something that I should set up instead. Today I want to talk a little bit about emotions, and I think it's probably fair to say that for most counselors, what we are working with when we have clients are, the predominant at least, are issues of emotion. There are some other things that maybe kind of figure in, but when we're looking at relationships, when we're looking at personal development, when we're looking at personal growth, remediation, all of those kinds of things, very much of it is affected by emotions. And so there's a lot of terms that are being used these days that I don't know. Some of them are a little too trendy. And as you may be aware, I sometimes use a term in a way that makes sense to me, not necessarily kind of the more accepted usage. Probably I should change that. But I also don't want to just, I guess, introduce more jargon into what's being talked about. So at this point, I'm going to go along with the terms that, as I say, make sense to me, even if they're already kind of being used elsewhere. So what I want to talk about today is, sometimes maybe is talked about as emotional intelligence, but maybe it's more about emotional understanding, emotional management. Those might be terms that are more accurate. And I want to just give you a tool that I think is fairly simple and straightforward. Usually I use this for younger people, but it absolutely could be used for adults. And as usual at the very beginning of something, when it's new, it's kind of difficult, it kind of feels artificial, it feels like maybe it's not doing what it's supposed to do, and people might be more prone to want to give up on it. But I really encourage you to give things a try. That is not to say that everything that I talk about with, on these videos or when I work with my clients is in itself absolutely going to work. People are different. There's all kinds of different variables. But it's also not fair, it's not accurate to give something just a small try and say it didn't work, and therefore you know that it doesn't work. That I don't think is very scientific. That's not very balanced. So give this a try. I don't know exactly what that means in terms of length of time, how much effort to put in, but what you would feel would be fair, okay? And whether it's for you, for a young person that you work with, your own child, or so forth, how I suggest is these are feelings faces, and these feelings faces are copyrighted, and what I see them called is the feelings flashcards. I don't know if they've got something that they are known as kind of more comprehensively, but I like them because they've got some good effort put into them. They're fairly expressive, but as I say, they're copyrighted. So what I normally tell clients is go online and do a search for feelings faces, and you may find these with a watermark on them or an unprotected version because, again, they are copyrighted. But there's other versions out there that you can use that are public domain. And so what I've got here is, it looks like I've got 30 different feelings. Not all of those are actually feelings, emotions. And that's one of the criticisms I have about using this set. But the other thing is just the number is kind of too much. So I would suggest that you're looking at between 10 and 15 faces. Some studies, and maybe we'll take a look at this at some point in the future, say that there are basically 6 emotions. And then what we've got beyond those 6 are kind of variations. Some of it's a variation of intensity and so on. But when we look at 10 to 15 or around the 12-ish mark, that's kind of human experience. That's, at least in Western culture, that's kind of what we normally communicate. That's how we interact. That's how we think of our emotional lives, is those kind of 10 to 15. And so if you've got those, that's a start. And then adding the faces to it just gives it a little bit more depth, because sometimes the words themselves are not sufficient. Although the words themselves, having a dozen different names, is better than the typical sad, glad, mad. Okay, so for someone who seems to have some difficulty with acceptance of emotion, feels uncomfortable with emotion in his own life, gets into a lot of distress and interpersonal difficulties because of emotion, doesn't maybe recognize emotion in others, those kinds of things, this can be a helpful approach. So first of all, you've got the feelings faces. You've maybe got them someplace prominently, like a kitchen. Fridge is probably a good idea. Some other place that's relatively well traveled within your home or wherever else these might be used. And as I say, you want to have a fairly good quality representation. And then both when the person is feeling uncomfortable, but also just more generally, just kind of by a matter of becoming a bit of a pattern of behavior, a bit of a habit there. Every now and then do a check-in and say, what am I feeling? Okay, so there's a 3-step process. The very first step is, what am I feeling? And by referencing the feelings faces, whatever it looks like for you, you can get a better idea of what is that? What's the nuance here? Because again, sometimes it comes out as I'm angry. And angry, or anger especially, and we'll probably do a future video about this, anger itself is often a blanket that covers up a lot of other details. And knowing those details will be very helpful. So what am I feeling, number one? Number two, why am I feeling this? The why I'm feeling it does a couple things. Okay, one, in addition to naming it, it gives you some control. And that seems to be a really important human experience, is to feel that we can control things in our lives. And emotions are one of those experiences for many people where we feel that we're out of control. And so just by bringing it back into some kind of word that expresses what I'm experiencing, we are now, again, a little bit on top of it. Okay, so we're not totally out of control. So that's a piece of what's happening. The other thing that takes place when we say, why am I feeling this, is it helps it also to make some sense. I do need to say that why am I feeling this is not easy to decide sometimes. There are chemical changes in our bodies, right? Or there might be an incident, but it hasn't reached your consciousness. So you don't recognize what happened. Some level of you is dealing with it, but it's not all the way up where you can actually process it intelligently. So that second question doesn't always have an answer. Okay, I would suggest that most of the time it does, or at least lots of the time it does. Maybe not every time. And then the third thing is, what am I going to do about it? Okay, so I have named the emotion. I have maybe an idea of why I have this emotion. But for sure, I get to do something about this emotion. So whereas our experience may be that emotions simply happen to us, what doesn't just happen to us when we become more intentional is what we do with that, okay? And emotion to me is energy, it's flavor, it's the spicing added to life. So it's a good part of our lives. But just like you can oversalt a dish, sometimes the emotion itself is not appropriate to the situation, it's not helpful to the situation, and then we need to kind of moderate it. Okay, so we need to do something to the fact that we've caused something to be too salty, right? Or it's whatever, too paprika-y. Paprika to me actually has no taste, so I don't actually know why people use it. Anyway, so for us just to go through and to practice that 3-step process, prompted by using, with reference to feelings faces, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this to the best of my knowledge? And what am I going to do about that? All right. And so, again, if this is for you, you lead yourself through it with some regularity, certainly when you're into some distress, but other times as well, because especially in distress, it's hard for us to learn, but also because we just want to develop the habit of being reflective about our experience until we really kind of feel that it's now in place. But if you're helping a young person, and this is very helpful for young people, one of the key tasks for young people is to get a sense of their emotional lives and to do some regulation of their emotional lives. So to help a young person, again, not just in distress, but out of distress as well, just as a normal part of the day, like this, right? And maybe you've got even a smaller version that goes with the child to school, right? So it's on the inside cover of a book. And that's just another little prompt, right? And that can also be a really helpful thing to make use of when your child is away from you, okay, and with other people. And that place in our society is most commonly going to be at schooling. If you've got any questions or comments, if there's a topic that you would like me to talk about that I haven't gotten to quite yet, please let me know and I will make it a priority. Thanks very much.